The Medical Research Council has warned that in the next 6 months, the number of people infected with the AIDS virus could reach 100,000. They've asked the government for a further £500,000 towards their research programme. Today, the Secretary of State for Health, Norman Fowler, has been in Holland to see how they're trying to contain the virus.
A few December tourists on a pleasure boat pass an ordinary-looking Amsterdam city bus, filling up nicely with heroin addicts. They call them the Junkie buses. There are two with windows discreetly frosted, stopping for an hour or so at well-publicised times and places to hand out what the addicts crave, drugs and needles to inject them. The addicts like to remain obscure, so an official of the health authority posed as a desperate client to demonstrate the procedure. Dirk shows and throws away 2 used needles, which could be contaminated with the AIDS virus. But there is no temptation to use needles a second time, or pass them and perhaps the virus on, because a new sterile needle is handed out for each used one returned. Today, the Social Services Secretary, Norman Fowler, could judge the bus for himself. Dutch officials told him they now see regularly 90% of Amsterdam's 8,000 addicts. The Dutch know their strategy is highly controversial. Still, they insist supplying addicts with laboratory drugs plus sterile needles seems to have reduced addiction slightly, at the same time slowing the spread of AIDS.
It is very dangerous indeed, and something which we must use everything to try to prevent, the sharing of needles. There is no question about that, and therefore all we're talking about is how we do that. And clearly ministers will be considering this.
It's late afternoon and the Junkie bus is on the move again to keep another appointment with some of those most at risk of spreading AIDS. Now it's for Mr. Fowler and his cabinet colleagues to decide if this example should be followed in Britain. This is James Robbins for the 9 o'clock news in Amsterdam.
Politicians from 21 The government is today launching the latest phase of its battle against AIDS, and it's hoping to hammer home its message by reaching out to millions of television viewers. A 40-second advertisement has been especially commissioned to draw attention to the information leaflet, which will soon be going out to 23 million homes throughout the country.
There is now a danger that has become a threat to us all. It is a deadly disease and there is no known cure. The virus can be passed during sexual intercourse with an infected person. Anyone can get it, man or woman. So far, it's been confined to small groups, but it's spreading. So protect yourself. And read this leaflet when it arrives. If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you. So don't die of ignorance.
The government's extensive publicity campaign has been given a guarded welcome by the Terence Higgins Trust, which was set up to provide a counselling service for people with AIDS. They're glad it started, but say it's still failing to provide clear information. One of the Trust's administrator, Nick Partridge, is with me now. Well, Mr. Partridge, you've seen this advertisement for the first time. What do you think of it?
Well, we're very glad that it started. It's something that we've been asking for since we published our first leaflet in 1983. However, we are a bit disturbed that it doesn't provide clear information for how people can prevent the spread of HIV. Using condoms, for instance, is a good example of that. And that it's very frightening. We don't want the population to panic. The level of infection in the country as a whole is still very low. It's not what people have done in the past that they should worry about, but it's what they're going to do in the future that they should be concerned for.
But isn't the real point of this commercial to alert us so that next week, when this pamphlet drops through our letterbox, we don't just throw it away as a piece of junk mail?
Certainly, and we hope that everybody will read the leaflet, and we hope that that's the start of a campaign which is going to develop. We've got to use a lot of different techniques to get the message across. The leaflet is rather wordy. We'd like to see something more easily understood. And the message is very simple. It's be careful in your sex life and protect yourself.
Do you think the campaign as a whole is going to get through to the people at risk and persuade them to change their sexual habits?
If it's coordinated properly and if it's properly funded and if there are proper backup services, and that means that you've got to see an increase in funding for sexually transmitted disease clinics, an increase in funding for all of the voluntary organisations involved in the fight against AIDS. If we can do that, then yes, we've got a very real chance of stopping the spread of infection.
And what about progress so far? Is the message getting through?
We believe so. Certainly in the gay community, you've seen a major drop in the number of general sexually transmitted diseases, and you've seen a drop in the new cases being seen in the gay community. So if that can be followed by everybody else, then yes, we've got a real chance of stopping the spread of infection.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. All servicemen are being offered AIDS tests when they return from duties abroad, and they're receiving full briefings about the risks. The Ministry of Defence is even considering the possibility of discharging those who catch the disease. 600 soldiers from the 1st Battalion, the Queen's Own Highlanders, are being strongly advised to take the tests following an exercise in Kenya, where the disease is rife. The men went to the coastal area near Mombasa and Malindi, where there are many prostitutes. In London, the first ward to be purpose-built for the treatment of AIDS patients opens on Monday. It's at the Middlesex Hospital, and our science correspondent James Wilkinson has been to see how it'll operate.
As AIDS spreads, hospitals like the Middlesex in London are coming under increasing pressure. Seriously ill AIDS patients are occupying single rooms, which doctors need for other patients. So now the hospital is to open the country's first purpose-built AIDS ward. It can cope with 12 patients at a time, 4 of them in single-bedded cubicles. Because AIDS patients have little resistance to disease, they suffer from a range of infections and other illnesses. Doctors say the help they need is better provided in specialist wards like this one. Their treatment will be more efficient, their nursing care made easier. So what special problems will the nurses have to cope with?
Very often there's loneliness because of isolation from their families and friends. Perhaps they are living some sort of a double life. If they're homosexual people or bisexual people, their families don't always know, so that's a very tricky situation. And also there are a lot of prejudices and attitudes around still, even today, and that seems very unfair, but it's obviously a great stress to the patients.
So how would you sum up then your feelings now? You're facing this new task of looking after so many AIDS patients altogether.
Well, I think that we have the opportunity here to really set a standard. The nurses here will have good sound knowledge and they'll be good clinical practitioners, so therefore they'll be safe practitioners. They're caring people without being hysterical, and I think the time has come for us to put a more positive approach on this picture. I mean, the idea of AIDS is sort of gloom and despair all round because today we have no cure. But in the future we will have, and I have tremendous faith in all of my medical colleagues who are working so very hard on that we will have a cure soon.
15 nurses will work on this ward. As the number of patients in London increases, it's expected more units like this one will have to be built.
Right.